morning, everybody. Well, hopefully morning by the time that you're listening to this episode. Welcome back to one of our solo episodes of the Nutrition Blueprint podcast. And I'm joined or co-joined here by the one and only podcast sidekick who's been getting a lot of praise on being now part of the podcast, Mackenzie Green, everybody. What's going on, Kenzie? How are you?
Hi, I'm glad to be back. It's been a couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm back in Tampa, so that's a big kind of like difference. Happy Thanksgiving. I heard it was Thanksgiving in Canada this week, or I guess like a couple of weeks ago by the time this recording is released.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So it was well when we're recording this, it was on Monday. So it was nice. I got to come back home, see my parents, see my dog, have some good food. So that was really
what's
nice.
customary in Canada for Thanksgiving, and is it like usually like the second like Monday of like October or something, or how do they kind of like define it every year?
Yeah, I think it's similarly to in the States, it's like the second some or the something of October, you know how they I'm pretty sure it's might be the second one. I'm not sure what week of October we're on right now, but I would say it's pretty much the same. Like, do you guys have turkey and mashed
Yeah.
potatoes and stuffing? Yeah. So
Do
pretty
you
much
know if
the same thing,
is it
just
the same,
different
just
date.
kind of like history behind it, just like a day to give grace and stuff? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
pretty
that's
much.
pretty cool. You were like, we're gonna be cooler than you. We're gonna do it like 1 month before you guys.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in Canada it's better because it's spaced out a bit because you with the in the States you've got Thanksgiving and then Christmas is coming up right after.
I
But here
do
we get
agree
to
with that. Yeah. And
celebrate.
I think actually from the nutritional standpoint, many people kind of tied it up. So they're like Thanksgiving, and then I'm just simply going to kind of like, staple like the non-dietary, like I don't care about what I eat type of thing up until December. And then like, we just, I guess it's probably a better kind of like way to do it for the way you guys do it. It's like, okay, like, Turkey Day, it's in October, then let's get back to it. And then we'll have the holidays in December. There's no more holidays in between now and December or big ones.
No, just Halloween, which isn't really a holiday, but
It
well,
could
though
be for
I
some
do think
people.
it could be. It could be. Do you
Yeah.
celebrate Halloween? Do you
Um,
like to dress
GB
up?
wanted to be Frida this year. You know who Frida is? Like she's an artist, like Mexican
No.
artist.
Oh, yes, yes, I
Yeah,
do.
yeah, Frida Kahlo. So
Yeah.
she wanted to dress up as that. So I'm guessing there may be something that we may be doing. There's always somebody that kind of like come up with something, but yeah, we quote unquote celebrated.
Nice. That's fun.
But yeah, yeah, but we're kind of back in Tampa, back to our element, and yeah, lots of things in the kind of vicinity. But I know we're talking about something pretty cool today. So you came up with this idea, and I was just like, let's roll with it. So,
Okay.
what do we wanted to go over today?
Yeah, well, maybe we can start off with since you're coming back from vacation, it might be interesting for listeners to, I mean, not related to the topic we're going to be discussing today, but might be interesting for people to hear. Do you change your routine when you're coming back? Do you feel like after this you have to get back on track, quote unquote? Um,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, this time it was a little bit different because when we were in Mexico City, we were kind of like living there, like quote unquote, right? Because it was not necessarily a vacation, because I was still working my typical, day job. It's remote, right? But we were waking up still early, logging into work, seeing clients, doing all the things. It was just doing it in a different place, and then we would take our time off to just go and explore, whether it was a different city and stuff. So I guess like the past couple of weeks have been, we changed our routine simply to one that we're shopping in different places, and but we were still kind of cooking from home. But in other situations, whether it's like, for example, when we traveled to South Asia a couple of years ago, it was a little bit different because it was 3 weeks of like actual vacation with some work intertwined in between. And it was a little bit different. So we were I think like coming back was a big of a shock because of the time difference and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of times it takes me a little bit of a week to kind of readjust to certain kind of like things, but we try to kind of stay ahead of it. And to be honest, every time we built so many strong habits over the years that like for us, like when we come home, we're like, oh my God, I'm so happy that I get to kind of like eat home cooked meals again and different things like that. Unless we kind of stay in places like, Airbnbs and all. But I find that a lot of people typically struggle to, it takes them like a week or two to kind of get back into like routines and different things like that. So we try to not deviate too much from the typical things that kind of like are part of our routine. So for example, people ask me, do you work out when you're on vacation? It's like, yes, but not as an obligation, but rather more as a way to just keep moving, keep active, depending on what I'm doing. And at the same time to kind of keep the momentum, because when I come back, then I struggle if I don't necessarily kind of do a lot of like working out and different things like that. And from the nutritional standpoint, we try to kind of like stay ahead as we're kind of coming back. So every time like we come back, if for example, right now my mom was here, so we already had groceries and everything. But in other cases, we would on the way back, like sometimes like, as we're waiting for our bags in the airport, like GB would be kind of like grocery shopping online. So we come home and like somebody will deliver food within a specific kind of like time frame or the next morning. So we try to like pick it up as best as we can and as soon as possible depending on what we do. And we usually try to like make comebacks or come back from travel on a weekend day, so or a Friday or a Saturday. So it's a bit more of a transitional kind of like phase instead of coming back on like a Monday. Now this week we did on a Monday, but it was again a bit different because it's not like we were vacationing full on, for the past couple of weeks. So that's a typical kind of like way that we kind of like handle that. So we can kind of like smoothly transition into things, but it also depends on the length of our travel. But that's the way we typically do it.
Nice. And
Yeah.
overall, awesome trip.
Yeah, it was great. We yeah, Mexico City is a really cool city. It's kind of like you take the all the first world thing, or like yeah, like the first world things from the US or places like that, and then you kind of put it in a Latin American country. So which for people listening that are from Latin American countries, they would totally understand, from like the chaos and traffic and the I don't know how to explain it in English, but it's just more about like Latinos a lot of times they're just, they get their ways in different kinds of things. So like it's just a little bit different. So we really enjoy that. And yeah, especially like because I grew up in Venezuela, so like I've been here in the US for closer to 12 years now. But it just kind of brought me back a little bit. So it was a really nice experience, and definitely one that we may repeat very soon. So we'll see.
Nice. Well,
Mhm.
that's actually a great segue, you talking about bringing you back and being in the US for 12 years, because today we're going to be talking a bit about your career journey that has gotten you to where you are now.
Mhm.
And along the way, maybe giving some advice that you wish you could give to your younger self. Which I also think is great for me because I'm on my way to becoming a dietitian right now. And yeah, it'll be nice to hear what kind of advice you have, not just about becoming a dietitian, but just about,
Yep.
growing up, going through your career journey.
Yeah. So if let's say where did you want to start? How far back do you want to go?
Maybe let's go with what in high school, what did you want to do?
Oh, that's a good one. So let's see. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be practice medicine, and back then it was the way the things worked. And I grew up in well, I was born in a big city, so the capital of Venezuela, and I grew up in a small town that was about 4 hours east of that, in a coast town or coastal type of area, a little beach town. Um, and back then, to get into med school, there was only like three schools in the country that offer that, and it was very competitive. In fact, one of like their biggest, central like colleges, universities, like it was like a public school. It was a very, very like either you had to know somebody, your parents had to be doctors that graduated from there, or you had to be really, 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 really smart in terms of like, or really good test taker, pretty much. So there was like a national exam, kind of like an SAT that we did. And then based on that, they have placements. So I studied so hard throughout high school just so I could have the best grades to be competitive enough to be able to get into med school, because that's what I wanted to do all along. There's a few opportunities to do it. There's like the national test, and they give some placements for the top of that. And then there's always going to be like the actual, like, faculty of medicine exam. It's just only for med school, that people that want to apply for that school. So I did both. And I did not get in any of them. One of them, like they give like, maybe like, I don't know, 20 spots, 100 spots to, I mean, I'm talking about thousands of people that take it. And the second one, they give like 300 spots to, again, another 20,000 people that take it. So I think I placed like, on the top 5% or so, 10%, but it wasn't enough. So that was very tough for me. And I did not get into med school, and it was like really difficult for me. But I came to the US for like an exchange student year. So this is literally where I did one year of high school here. So completely separated out from like, med school and all that. I graduated from, it's interesting because I graduated twice. I graduated from Venezuela, and I graduated here from the US. Because in Venezuela, everything goes until your junior year. I don't know how it works in Canada, but which is basically 11th grade. And in the US, they have a 12th grade. So I did 11th grade, graduated, and then I did 12th grade, and I graduated here too. So that actually opened a few doors for me. But I went back, and I was like, okay, I need to take this test again. But then again, it was so competitive. You had to play so high into this like thing. So I ended up not going to med school. I ended up going to, so the way things worked in Venezuela, it's like you have the faculty of medicine, or like the school of medicine. They have all healthcare like related fields are part of the same school. So nutrition, nursing, physical therapy. So I started exploring all these different kind of, careers. And I was like, okay, what kind of resembles the most that, but I did it simply to see, okay, I'm going to do this for a year to jump into, because they told me it's easier to jump into actually like, med school once you're already inside of like the school. So I was like, that's my whole plan the whole time. So I was like, okay, nutrition sounds kind of cool. No, never had an interest in doing that. I didn't even know it was a career. So I was like, okay, let me just do this. Let me try this out. And I started. And one semester went by. I was like, this is hard. My first class ever taken was biochemistry. You taken biochemistry yet?
No, not yet. That one they actually cut out of the curriculum at my school, and they divided it into different courses. So I don't actually have to take a biochem course, so I don't have to feel that pain.
You're so glad. Yeah, it's painful. We didn't have to take one, we had to take two. So, and that was like, because in Venezuela, it's a little bit different than the US, because in the US, you do take a lot of like core classes. I don't know how it works in Canada too, but when you get into college, you start like a lot of core classes, like history and all this, like, math and all kind of stuff like that you're starting to take at the beginning. Venezuela is a little different. You start like head on into the career, like, or there's specific kind of classes. So that, so it's actually a very strong program, because you're starting with biochem 1, biochem 2, microbiology. And I think those were my top classes, microbiology. Then I had to take like, another nutrition. It was like 5 or 6 classes. So it was like very, very tough. So I did 1, 2, 3 semesters in there. But halfway through it, I went to a therapist, because I was really kind of struggling with that identity issue. That was like, okay, do I really want to be a doctor? Like, so I started doubting everything. And I was like, what am I going to do with this nutrition thing? What am I going to work? I mean, again, like going into this, I had no idea what to expect or what to do. My whole plan was just to simply make that a jumping, like a bit of a jump or a stepping stone into med school. So I got a big breakthrough when I went to see, I forgot her name, but like, she really helped me. And then she made this statement and said, 2 people actually said a couple of statements that really kind of marked my, pivot my career. One was this therapist who said, not all doctors wear coats. And I was like, boom, I realized that because back then, well, in Venezuela, like a lot of nutritionists, they work in hospitals, right? So I was like, okay, like not all doctors wear coats, but perhaps I just wanted to help people, by wearing quote unquote a coat. So it was more of a um, not necessarily an analogy, but just more about so I could understand that I could still help people other ways. And the second thing is that, my cousin one time says, like, I think honestly, doctors, they treat, people like or for specific conditions. And I feel like, as a dietitian, you could actually prevent people to actually getting to that in the first place. And I was like, oh, never saw it that way. So it was more preventive medicine and like avoiding people to get to a hospital in the first place, rather than treating them for something that could be, again, in many ways prevented. So that completely changed the course of my career. And I was like, I'm going to stay here. And at the time, like Venezuela was going through a lot of turmoil with like, politics and stuff. So I was like, I actually want to be a sports dietitian. I want to work with athletes. So I started applying for schools and all kinds of like scholarships and different things like that. Secretly, I didn't tell my parents about it. And no, actually, I did tell my parents about the application. I was because it was expensive. I think it was like $800 at the time, but I did apply, and I got accepted. And I said didn't want to go. I was like, no, I'm just gonna finish my career here. Long story short, I ended up coming here because of the fact that lots of changes happened in my life, and I was like, I need to take advantage of this opportunity, and it was probably the best decision I could have made. So that's kind of how the whole like dietitian kind of like career for me typically started, because I just kind of came in the US and I just simply continue it. So that was like the sort of like the beginning stages of like, nutrition as I practice it today.
Okay. So you got to the US and you were finishing your school there. Did you do any kind of odd jobs throughout university throughout college? In Canada, we say university. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you say university, you say college, but
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. We my like job wise, I actually started working since I was very young. So my dad owned a very small, I wouldn't call it a hotel. It's more like an inn. So it was like a very small place. So I worked with him as a tour guide. This is where I actually started like, speaking and meeting people from all over the world. So that was a really good opportunity for me to kind of like hone in on my, public speaking skills, because I would be kind of be sitting on this little like, boat on the very like, the very end of it. And I would just kind of be facing a crowd of people as we kind of were cruising through waters. And I would just kind of like, tell stories about like the places that we were at. And I became pretty good at it. And I would be the kind of person that would just kind of like jump in the water and like pull out one of those like huge like star what's it called, like the like sea stars, I guess, like they call them. Like, but there's like this place in Venezuela where you can actually see that they're like huge. They're this massive things, and you would take them out and show it to them. So I kind of like, I really enjoy that. I like to be kind of like the person kind of guiding others and stuff like that. So it was a pretty good experience. And I think now looking back, it really kind of helped me become a pretty good public speaker, or at least being able to kind of like talk to crowds. So that was like really interesting. Then I worked as a bartender. So that was like another really cool experience to interact with people. I think every single thing I've ever done kind of like shaped me into learning how to deal with, a lot of things at the same time. So used to work in weddings. So with a lot of drunk people, unlimited alcohol. So, those the kind of like things kind of like teach you patience and those kinds of kind of like areas in terms of that. So that was really, really interesting to kind of get into that. And I did it for a while. And in the US, I actually kind of like tied up with working as a server. I think if there's anybody that want to go into the service business, meaning, like coaching, helping others, especially if you're in college, you should all become at some point a server in a restaurant or a bartender or something like that, because you understand really the intricacies of pleasing people and making sure that you are like in customer service. I think that's a very important thing, and how to deal with a lot of people under pressure, right? Like I remember I used to work in an Applebee's. You guys have Applebee's in Canada?
Yes, yeah, we
Yeah.
do.
So I used to work in an Applebee's in the middle of Indiana. So imagine this, like, Latin looking guy in a very, white town, working in an Applebee's. So with an accent and everything. So, it was interesting, but I think it was a really good way for me to learn how to work under pressure, how to move, be quick on my feet. And that's definitely something that really like taught me how to how to interact with people, and how to deal with sometimes, like, unhappy, people that were unhappy in the choices, or the way that I was kind of like managing certain situations. So that was like my first job ever here in the US. Definitely kind of taught me a lot, and I did that for almost a year, from moving from server to now like actually working as a bartender. And yeah, that was I had my mistakes and all different things like that, but that was sort of like, yeah, I definitely think, like, being in the service business and being in like the restaurant business, it's, you really learn a lot on, and you get humble real quick on when you're actually kind of like dealing with all kinds of different people, and different kinds of settings, particularly in an Applebee's, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's kind of good to reflect on some of those jobs that they're not the job that you were planning, that that wasn't your end goal, but it was some things along the way, and recognizing when you're taking things away and what things you're taking away from those jobs. Because I mean, personally, I've worked lots of random jobs throughout school, and in the moment I wasn't enjoying them a lot of the time. But looking back, I say, oh wow, like that, I'm so grateful I have that experience now, and I wouldn't have been able to be where I am now without that. So I think it applies to so many areas in life where
So
you may
many.
not be where you are, where you want to be right now. Maybe it's with your health, maybe it's in your career, maybe it's in your relationship, but there's always something you can take away from the moment that you're in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it doesn't make sense in the moment. That's a big thing, right? It makes sense later on, but you just need to kind of have the conviction that it will make sense in the future. And sometimes it's hard to think about. I mean, many times I kind of like walk out of a restaurant, that restaurant, in tears, because of, I worked so hard to make, like, $30, like, all day long, because it was just so slow, or getting yelled at, or like, screwing an order, or like, being like those different things, like, teach you resilience. They teach you, how to be, how to not give up, and how not to quit. Anybody that's ever worked in a restaurant would understand exactly what I'm talking about. It's so freaking hard. So those things like build your character. And then whenever you build yourself up with that, then, and again, there's other sometimes like people, and I think that's, if there's like, going through advices I would give my younger self. But one of some of the advices is like, I'm glad that I did it, which is, one, it's like, don't give up on the things that, don't give up when things become hard. I think it's especially when it's things that, can help you, obviously, um, do the things that you want to do. Sometimes, like, I work as a server now because it was going to help my career in nutrition. In a way, it could have, right, or it did, because maybe I learned a lot of different things from that. But it was more because I knew I needed the money to be able to kind of save to do X, Y, and Z things, right? So sometimes, like, the motivations behind it are different. But as I progress, I realized that, more doors open up for you as you kind of go through that process, people you meet, and things that you kind of like do from that. I think a lot of times that people just want to take, again, like, even just kind of like they're doing weight loss, they want to take shortcuts in works and jobs and stuff like that, and they think, like, me working as a server at right now, no, like, there's no way, like, I'm too good for that. And that's a very selfish and thing. And I would never hire somebody, for example, in our company, that would think about that way. They think that they're too good for something, because I have mopped floors. Like, if we had like a physical office, and there's a day that, somebody, let's say somebody's cleaning the office and didn't show up, I'm not gonna let my office actually kind of be, dirty. I'm gonna go and clean it up myself. So I think it's like, not just never thinking that you're good enough for, or that you're not, or basically what's what I'm trying to say, just never thinking that you're too much for something, or that you're just like, too good for something. I think it's a definitely like a bigger kind of thing. And sometimes depending on what it is, I mean, we live here in corporate America, like so many people lose their jobs so many days, and like, and now they have to find themselves, like the biggest kind of more humble thing is like with immigrants, especially Venezuelan immigrants, because they come here and they get a big slap on their face when they realize that, doctors and lawyers and dentists, that they have to come in here and they may have to work Uber at the very beginning stages because their licenses are not valid here. Right. That's a very like, big kind of like punch in the face, and a big reality check that you have to go back to that. And then the people that succeed and the people that do well here in the US when they move here are the ones that do it and they don't complain about it. But then you have the ones that, like me, I'm a lawyer, for God's sakes. Like, I'm not going to be doing Uber. Okay, well then you're going to starve, or you're going to be really struggling to be able to do it. And those are the people that says like, I'm just going to go back home, and then they struggle and they complain. So I think that's a big kind of piece, is like never really think that you're too good for something, and be humble enough to accept the fact that a lot of times you may have to do smaller things like that, because that just kind of like shows up as, it shows your character, and also kind of shows up as who you truly are, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's a good piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that I had is not specifically related to past jobs, but when did you start learning English? Have you been speaking English your whole life?
No, so let's see. Well, actually in school. So like if you go to any like particularly like, Latin American countries, they, English is a very luxurious things to know, because of the fact that it gives you more advancement in opportunities as you progress. And both of my parents, I was fortunate enough that both of them actually were, they studied abroad. My dad actually studied in England, and my mom went to school in Connecticut. So they both spoke English. So I was fortunate enough to be able to learn from them. But at the same time in school, I had an hour of English every day. Now, not everybody actually took advantage of that. I tried it. I did, because I knew for some reason I really wanted to kind of use it in the future. So when I came here as an exchange student, I had the basics. But then perfecting my English just came from being in the middle of a little small town in Indiana called Portland, and being immersed in, living with an American family that spoke zero Spanish. And you were just immersed in that. If I would have maybe gone to Miami, perhaps my English would not be what it is today. It just came easier for me. But if you talk to my brother, for example, same kind of education, same thing. He was an exchange student. He does have a very strong accent. So I think it depends. I think like sometimes like languages come easier for some people. At least English it was for me. Now don't ask me to speak anything else. So that'll be a little bit more difficult.
Well, you said when you were working in the restaurant in Indiana that you had an accent. Did your accent just disappear over time?
I feel like there's some things that still kind of like, sometimes show up, but the less and less. Like, for example, I struggled to say the word like, mountain, and because I couldn't really do like the silent T. So I would always kind of like struggle with those things. So I would say like mountain and stuff like that, or like birthday, or like, saying I'm going to the beach, and then I would say a different word, you know what I'm talking about, right? So
Oh yeah.
yeah, so that was like those are like the kind of things that a lot of times I kind of like run into. But yeah, but I taught myself. I always kind of had this thing that I didn't want to, for some reason, I don't know why, but I was like, I don't ever want people to notice that I have an accent. And I don't know why. I don't think it was like kind of like any kind of shame around on that or stuff, but I think I just wanted to prove myself. I was like, people would be like, oh my God, you don't have an accent. And I was like, yeah, I know, I'm pretty good at that. So but then I could speak Spanish like no problem. So the only thing that kind of throws me off as Latin is definitely just gonna be my face, pretty much. But it was not a shameful thing or anything. I just really wanted to be really good at it. So if there's anything about me and my personality, it's like I want to be the best of the things that I do. So that's, I always kind of like, seek for excellence, which is, it's not always a good thing. because that can come at a cost to your mental health. And that's kind of what brought in a lot of, anxiety issues, over the years for me, that I think it's been kind of hard to overcome. Achieving excellence and pursuing perfection and being the best that you can be at something, or that kind of competitive spirit it can definitely play a toll in mental health and in the future. And as you shape it up now, that like look back, it's turned me into who I am today, the success we've had, but it's definitely come at a cost on many different kinds of areas in our life. So it's not always easy. And I think that's just more of a personality thing, but definitely have learned some hard lessons over the years because of that. So
If you had some advice to share to your former self about related to that, related to pursuing your goals and to anxiety, what advice would you give to them?
it always works out. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing. And when I look at people, friends, colleagues, it's very rare when I kind of find or run into somebody that they're worse than they were when, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And if they are, it's because it's a rare thing on people that just went down the wrong path. It's not because they didn't try hard enough, they just went in the wrong path. But every single person, my clients who I talk to all the time, and it's always like, when you look back when you where you were at like 5 years ago, overall, I'm not talking about your weight, I'm not talking about this stuff, I'm talking about overall. Are you today in a better place than you were 5, 10 years ago? In most cases, unless people went through a rough patch and whatnot, like they're always going to be better than they were. And a lot of times, like when I was like growing up, I worried so much about small things, like, I'm not going to have enough money to do this, or I won't be able to, or like a grade in college, right? Like, oh my God, I got a C. And I would just like be so upset about it for days. And when I look back, I don't even remember what test I got a C on, right? Like I can't remember it. So sometimes like we drown ourselves in a cup, without any need for it. Because we think that that's going to, I mean, even we think about it when we were kids, right? Like, when we're small kids and we get grounded, and when I got grounded, it was just like the worst thing that could ever happen in the world. Like, oh my God, like my world is ending. I'm not going to go to this party because my mom is like, make me actually stay here. And as we grow up as adults, we start to see that those things actually, they really turn into it just in a different way, but you still think it's the end of the world. Like, and I haven't, you know, thank God I haven't kind of gone through really tough situations, like, losing somebody, knock on wood, or things like that. I mean, I have, but not necessarily immediate people to me, but I know people have gone through stuff like that. But the reality is like it always passes. And I think, definitely a big advice that I would give my younger self is like, it's gonna be okay. One of my mentors once told me, like, where you're into the situation you're in today, whether it's good or bad, does not define who you will be tomorrow, or who you will become tomorrow. So today I could be, a college student just like you are. Like that doesn't define, like, or getting a bad grade doesn't define that you're going to be a bad employee or a bad business owner or a bad parent because you got to see, right? So I think a lot of times we have to take a 10,000-foot view of what that represents in our life and how that you think that's actually going to impact us. When you think about nutrition and you think about weight and all that kind of stuff like that, the guilt that people feel sometimes when they make a bad decision around it, does it truly matter? It doesn't. And I think sometimes like people get so caught up in thinking that one bad decision is going to ruin the entire progress, that now they turn on into multiple decisions because they feel like they might as well, they're not strong enough to say, like, you know what, if I'm doing this today, I'm probably just going to continue to do it. So they create a reality for themselves and a limitation, and they build walls around them. Which is, I guess, another piece of advice I can probably give my younger self. Stop building imaginary walls around yourself, because you are your biggest limitation. literally. Like there's nobody limiting, what you can accomplish but yourself. Nobody's kind of like, saying, pointing a gun to your head or saying like, you can't do this, right? You are the one doing that, right? And that's when I learned this concept of limiting beliefs, because we are a result of what we believe in. And we believe, like, for example, when I started this business, I started to be a dietitian, not a business owner. So I won't be able to actually have a successful business in the process. That was a something I was saying to myself. It wasn't a reality. It's not a fact, right? And it's not until I realized that there's people that have gone to school for this that had no idea what a business was and how to start a business, that they decided to do it. So, and this applies to anything in your life. In our space, teaching people how to lose weight, for example, or teaching people how to like eat healthy and build better habits. They struggle with it, even working with us, because they don't believe themselves that they can do it. So it's limitations, it's walls that they're building. And the only person that can knock off those walls and those limitations, it's you, nobody else. Nobody else can do that. And people go through motivation and, stuff, and like they go to like seminars and all kinds of stuff like that. That gives you inspiration, but not the motivation to like, knock down those walls. Now, sometimes that inspiration kind of gives you the insight and the reflection to say, no, fuck this, excuse the language, but that's just the reality. So I think for many years, I built so many walls around myself, and still do. I still have walls that I have built around myself that I feel like, I need to, chop away at like trying to kind of knock them off. But it's a work in progress. I have a friend who's she's now into like spiritual journeys and different things like that. And there's so many areas of our past that shape up who we are, but that we are completely unaware of what it is. So many things in our childhood that we went through, whether they're traumas or whatever may be the case, that define how we live our lives today. And we're absolutely clueless, and we don't even think it's a problem. Like she openly shares, for example, in seminars and different things like that she was, molested by a family member when she was growing up, and she never actually kind of had a clue. And it just came back to her and she realized how much damage it's made by the way that she lives her life. So, and so many limitations she created about, relationships and different things like that. So she realized that was a wall that she built for a reason that she never knew existed until she went through a spiritual journey to understand it. So that's the problem that I think a lot of people kind of struggle with. So anybody can do whatever they want to do. I just feel like they just build so many walls and limitations around them that they are just locked up in a cell and they just don't want to get out of it. That's usually the big problem around that. And it's a lot of times, I'm not going to say it's not their fault or that it's their fault. But a lot of times it's shaped up by things that they're not just conscious about or aware about, pretty much.
Yeah, and I think our thoughts, we get into these habitual patterns of thinking based on things that we've experienced, whether we remember them or not. And I think another big issue is taking our thoughts and beliefs too seriously, taking them as a fact rather than as something that is malleable, and thoughts are going to come and go all the time. And for me, one of the pieces of advice I would give my younger self is to start practicing mindfulness earlier, start practicing meditation, because that's where you become aware of being able to observe thoughts and emotions. And once you can do that, then that's when you can start breaking down some of those walls, because you realize it's just something that's going through you rather than a permanent fixture in your life.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, when I think about like back to mindfulness, like we're people that were never here. Like we unfortunately live in a society that has like shaped us up to be never here, meaning like we're always thinking ahead. We're always thinking what's next, and we never take a time to just be here. And that's something that creates a lot of problems. This is obviously how I dealt with so many anxiety issues, right? Because, for example, a time in my life, I said to myself, I'm not going to be able to kind of have a business, like, so future, right? Why? Because, well, I don't have a green card. I don't have I may actually have to go home because I won't be able to kind of stay here because my visa is about to expire. Like, and I won't be able to do this. I will not be able to do this. So that's the narrative that was in my head all the time. Like, or I don't have money, so I won't be able to kind of like, do these different things and stuff like that. So it's like, I won't be able to do something, like, and that's again, future. Like that's like, an assumption that we're making about something, instead of like thinking, what is the situation right now? And what can I do about it today? I think another piece of advice in here is going to be focus on what you can control, because what you can't control will eat you up. Like that's just like the reality. When I was going through that period of time in which I didn't have like, like my visa was going to expire and all these different things like that, there's a lot of things that I couldn't control. Like I couldn't control the fact that I couldn't work. I couldn't control because it was just a status, like, right? I couldn't just kind of go to the government and knock, and it's like, hey, give me a permission to give me a work authorization. So it was a tough time, but I couldn't control that. And it goes from a smaller thing such as traffic and kind of being completely like waste an entire day in traffic, right? Or worse an entire day like mentally, because like traffic really got the best out of us over something that we couldn't control. I was having a conversation recently with one of my really, really good friends of ours that live in Orlando, and they were talking about their, like, she was talking about her grandma, that she's just a very like unhappy. I mean, she's actually not doing well right now. She's like 90 something years old. So imagine going through your entire life and being mad at life and mad at the world because everything is a complaint. You met people like that, right? That they complain about everything. These are people that never understood the limitations and the things that they had in themselves and never worked through them, because for them, they never had a problem. And to this day, they still don't. And that's usually why we have in this world so many people that, don't do things the right way, or hurt others and different things like that. So I think it's because of those things. So yeah, so I always invite anybody in our program and stuff like that. It's just be here, like be mindful. Don't be living in a different, day or a different thing, or don't remnants of the past, and start to think of, what could have gone differently and what could have gone whatever, because everything is an experience that shape up who you are. And if you're a religious, spiritual person, there's always going to be, I'm always going to be a believer that everything is shaped up in a certain way for a specific reason. And these like things that go beyond our comprehension and understanding. But and some people will kind of like listen to this and say like, no, I don't believe that. I believe like, we kind of shape up our own future, and in a way we do. But there's always going to be, I think, something that tells me that there's something else out there that has, kind of shaped that up for us. So we have an input. So it's more about how we choose to actually kind of go through that process in our life, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we can, a good way to finish off the story today. You've talked about starting your business and how you had a lot of insecurities. You were really unsure if you'd be able to do this. So once you graduated from nutrition, did you jump right into starting a business, or what did it look like after you graduated to get to where you are
No,
now?
I in my mind, I was like, no, I wouldn't be able to do this. But, or actually, I didn't even know I wanted to have a business at some point, but I know I wanted to be very successful. Um, because parts of my life that kind of shaped me up was like, I don't want to ever go through lack or not having enough, right? Because I went through that growing up. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm either gonna have a job that's gonna pay a ton. And when I got into nutrition, I realized that, there's average, jobs in dietetics. Unfortunately, this is a career that is undervalued. And the truth is, it doesn't really pay as much as we think. And some people are okay with that, but it doesn't, to me, it wasn't really part of my why, right? I think another big piece of advice I would give people is like, write out why you want to do the things that you want to do. Like, and then go beyond just like the very vague, terms such as, well, because I want to make money. No, that's not what you want to do this. There's something deeper. Why do you want to make money? And there's always going to be something that, that represents a why. Like when I asked you that question, my wife, she's like, because I want to be able to buy a house for my mom one day. Okay, that's a very deep why. So that makes it obviously understanding. So identify what that really is. And I think that's kind of like a bigger thing. So part of my why was like, I don't want to lack anything. So I realized when I was into like, after I graduated, I was like, okay, this is not working out. But I feel like I need to walk the line. I need to understand really this career. I need to practice it. I need to do the right things. And I think there's a big kind of mistake that I think a lot of like professionals now make, that there's like going to go into business immediately. It's like, well, live a little, like try to, and again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying everybody specifically in dietetics, I mean, you're a nutrition student, like need to go out there and work for 5 years before they establish a business. No, but in my opinion, I feel like it's helpful because you get like first-hand experience on how things work and how things operate. So I'm in my internships, I did clinical rotations, I work in hospitals, I saw trauma patients, I saw people on dialysis machines, I work with athletes at every single level possibly like that you can imagine, from snowboarders to professional fishermen, if you can believe that, to NFL athletes, like Major League Baseball players, like, people that play in like the hockey league, I mean, people like, I worked with somebody one time, like he was in the wrestling matches, like the WWE, like,
Oh,
India
wow.
guy. Yeah. So, I mean, the amount of people I have come across in my life has been, I mean, insane, from CEOs of like someone like, I mean, when I look back, I'm like, I can't believe I worked with one of the guys that it's like literally one of like the bigger, like, millionaires, billionaires in the world. And I was like, oh my God, I met that guy. Right. So it's all these things that if I would have said like, hey, I'm just going to go into business immediately and I'm going to start doing this. I mean, I'm not immersed with people like that anymore. Right. But because I chose to do that, and because I chose to take those opportunities, regardless of where that took me, that's another piece, so many pieces of advice that I'm kind of coming up here. Which is, not, don't be afraid to kind of like, get away out of your comfort zone. Right. And I moved so many times, from Indiana. It's like, I got an internship in Houston. Let's go. Like, I didn't even think about it. I was like, let's pack up. I did my internship in Houston and I got a job in Florida. I was like, let's go. I got the job in Florida. And then I was like, I got an opportunity to go to school in Orlando, which was like 3 hours or 2 hours away from where I was. Let's go. Right. Every single time I just jumped. And I think a lot of times, like, we are so afraid to do things that are those are the people that typically stay the same way, that they're not taking risks, or that at least they're not taking, they just are too afraid to feel uncomfortable. Because every single time, you do something different, you move into a different place, you feel comfortable. Like, when I look back, I don't have anything against the people that, for example, stay in their own hometown their whole lives, right? But I wouldn't do that. You got to see what's out there. And I think that's a bigger thing. So that and people like that, right? Like, they still work in the same place, they still have the same things, they still hang out with the same people, and they live their entire lives doing that, and they're happy. Don't get me wrong. I would never do something like that, because of the fact that I got to see what's out there. And if there's anything that, the situation in my country ever taught me, is that it worked out well for me, is the fact that, it forced me to take those leap of faith, and saying like, moving countries, moving states, changing jobs, like, doing all kinds of unimaginable things that gave me all the experiences that shaped up who I am today. So I think a lot of times, like, people are just too afraid to take those risks, or to just take those leaps, because they're just afraid of the unknown, and that uncomfortable feeling. But anybody that has gone through that, and I always tell them, even my clients, when we start working with them, it's like, this is going to be hard and it's going to be difficult, and they're scared, and they're fearful, and they're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But I always remind them, okay, look at yourself right now. What do you do for a living? Well, I'm an engineer, I'm a programmer, or something like that for X company. Well, it seems like you actually kind of have it figured out, like in terms of your career, right? Yes. How was it when you started that company? Difficult, hard. It was like, learned a lot to learn. How was it when you started school? How was it when you moved to this place? Well, difficult. So you understand what I'm saying, that you actually kind of have to go through rough patches in order for you to be able to succeed in something that you do. Because right now, It looks like, and we work people, they're marketing directors. I work with somebody from in New York that she's a marketing VP or director or something, or somebody's like a really huge programmer in this like massive company, like this big salesperson somewhere else. Everybody got there because they chose to feel uncomfortable doing something. And anybody listening to this, if you're, this is a nutrition podcast, right? So if you're thinking that, the things you need to do to accomplish your goals are going to be hard, they're going to be freaking hard. But you need to be willing to actually take that risk, because if you never tried it, you're going to be one of those people that says like, I wish I would have done that. That's another piece of advice. Like it's, think it, and I think I listened to this in a podcast. Think when you're like, years down the line, when you're, in your deathbed, and you're kind of like looking back and thinking, like when you're about to go, right? Like, is there anything that I regret not doing? And I want to be the kind of person that says like, no regrets. Like I did everything that I could have done in this life. And that's exactly what I'm working towards too. I don't want to be one of those people that's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have, gone to this place. I wish I would have started that business. I wish I would have like done this stuff, So like one of my mentors once told me like, life goes through and it's like a blink of an eye. And I'm 50 years old now. And I feel like, it was just yesterday that I was just getting out of school. So don't waste your time, just literally do the things that you want to do. And that's kind of part of it too, that sometimes I need to remind myself of. So
Yeah. One of my friends who I lived with when I was doing my first degree, she would say, do it for the nursing home. So like take a chance, go and do something that's going to be a good story one day. Usually it was when like one of us was going to make some kind of bad decision that might have been a fun time. She'd be like, yeah, do it for the nursing home.
yeah,
So
this is
maybe
gonna
not always the best situation, but it is good advice. Like you want to be able to look back on your life and have a good story to tell about what you did.
correct. I mean, that's kind of part of that process. It's like living experiences that are going to be part of, and shape you who you are. And I've done things that I'm not proud of, but I think that's also something that shaped me up into who I am today. But there's still a lot of work that I still need to do in terms of like the inner me, still a lot of walls that I need to kind of knock off, still a lot of like, limitations I have, still a lot of things that I need to improve on. But that's kind of part of the process, because I'm confident that when I'm 40 years old, for example, I'm going to be better than when I was right now that I'm 33. So that's the what I try to keep reminding myself, and not trying not to kind of like focus so much. And it's hard not to focus so much on like the things that the day-to-day kind of struggles, to really focus on understanding that it's all part of a bigger thing that, you're working towards to, in terms of who you're trying to become.
Yeah, and seeing that as a work in progress, and also just knowing that having that self-awareness piece of saying, here are some things I'm going to work on, and it's okay that not being there yet, because I think a lot of people go through life not having that self-awareness and not seeing their own potential because of that.
Yeah, because they're not living, they're just not there. And I think it needs to be a wake-up call for you, for people that if you're listening to this, is what is it in your life right now that you need to wake up to, and kind of have, whether it's like, hey, you know what, it's enough of being this unhealthier version of myself, like I want to change that. Or whether it's like, you know what, I need to say yes to that job, like, or I need to say yes to that opportunity where I'm going to be moving to another city that I don't know anybody. Or I need to say yes to that opportunity to travel for 3 months to go to Europe and do something. I mean, like all these different things, like you need to be just not afraid to just jump. Like but that same mentor that told me the whole thing about you'll never be who you are, like tomorrow you'll never be what you are today, he always also said, like, just jump and the net will always appear. So meaning, every time that you jump into do something, like you're not gonna fall and basically die or do something. There's always going to be something that holds you, and there's always going to be something that you just can't expect that something's going to hold you from the beginning, because you never know what's going to happen. That's a big thing. And every single time that I've jumped, there's always be something that kind of like, there's always been a net that appears, and that kind of like, so I now keep jumping every time I get an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily about not being afraid. You can be afraid, but it's about feeling that and just going for it anyway.
Yeah, there's two kinds of people in this world. There's like the I think it's like the what's it called, like, I have a friend of mine that kind of like showed me this. Like there's the people that are going to be I guess like victors and victims. um the victor is going to be the victim is going to be the person that like maybe kind of sees that there's a risk and there's like this opportunity, right? And no, it's actually the cowardice and something else, like the cowardice person, or like those people that kind of have that mentality. They look at an opportunity and they say, yeah, this is going to be good for me. And they kind of get to that end of, like, imagine that end of the cliff, going back to that jumping kind of thing, or the analogy. And they look at it and it's like, I know this is good for me, I know this is going to be great, but they just simply fall back because they're just too afraid of the unknown, right? And there's going to be maybe the victor. I know there's a different name for it, and this is going to be the person that says, okay, wow, like this is scary, I have no idea what's in front of me, and this is like, I'm just so afraid of what's going to happen, but they still choose to actually jump. So it's more about you asking yourself, do you want to be the coward or you want to be the victor that just simply says, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I'm going to be brave enough to be able to jump in and hope that the net appears.
Yeah, well, I think that is a really good piece of
Way to end
advice
it.
to end things off with today.
Yeah. It's been good. It's just a lot of times that we had to kind of dive deeper a little bit into understanding ourselves better than just like the banal banal things that sometimes that we go through on a daily basis. So yeah, and then for people listening in, hopefully this is helpful to you. Like, reflect on who you are and reflect on the things that a lot of times you're saying no to. And yeah, a lot of times, a lot of opportunities in your life are going to come from saying no, but the most exciting ones a lot of times are going to come from saying yes to bigger and better things, whether it's a nutrition program like ours, like maybe hopefully it's going to change your life, or it's going to be that job or that opportunity to travel, or that opportunity to do something different than what you're doing right now. It's going to suck, but it's all going to be part of the process and the adventure of life, I guess, if we call it that way. I feel like I'm talking like an old guy. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you kind of screenshot it, kind of share it on Instagram at Andres Ayesta at Nibble to Nourish. We'd love to kind of say hello to you. And we will see you guys on the next episode of the Nutrition Blueprint podcast. Make it a great day. Make it a great week. See you soon.